Welcome to Shaun's talk, which is a novel way of creating multi-tenant apps using Django where no third-party packages need apply. Shaun De Ponte is a senior data engineer at Calibre, where he leverages his Python, Azure, and machine learning skills to design, build, and optimize. It's not me, sorry. To optimize data pipelines and architectures for various clients and projects. He has 5 years of experience in data engineering and software development, working with diverse technologies and domains such as Django, web development, NLP, and OCR. There is more on the website, Shaun's CV, but I don't want to hold things up any longer. I'm going to hand straight over to Shaun. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome. Okay, welcome to PyCon ZA. Let me jump into it. I don't have much time. So today's talk is building multi-tenanted applications using Django. No third-party packages apply. A little bit about myself. I'm a senior data engineer at Calibre. I have a Master of Science in Business Analytics from Aston University. I build things in my spare time, and I'm a co-organizer for PyData Johannesburg. Okay, so what is a tenant? Effectively, a tenant, simply put, is a customer or a user that uses a software application that has their own isolation and their own isolated portion of that particular software, meaning that all the data that they enter into that particular application is specific and unique to that particular tenant or user, all right? So this is what we're going to achieve in today's talk. So there are three types of tenant structures, and apologies, I do have to go quite quickly through this. There's a lot to get through. So the three types of tenant structures that exist where a database is concerned is, number one, you can have a shared database with a shared schema, meaning every single tenant will have a single database but have separate schemas per tenant, okay? So that's one way. Another way is every tenant could have their own database. And the third way is you could have one database, one schema, and every tenant will be separated by an ID. Okay, so the approach that we're taking in this tutorial is one database, one schema, tenants separated by IDs that is denoted by subdomains that you will see in the URLs. Okay, so I'm going to show you the demo, and everything you're about to see here is running purely in Django's admin only, right? There's no custom front-end development or UI stuff going on here, so take note of that. Okay, so let's jump into that. So what we have over here on the left-hand side at the top, tenant1.exampleza.com, tenant2.exampleza.com. This is running on one server. This is one Django app. It's one server. Okay. I've also set my hosts my URLs in the host file. So tenant1 and tenant2 are just routed to local hosts. So that's how I'm able to resolve these URLs. Okay. The same concept would apply as if you deploy this. You just set your DNS records accordingly in your DNS provider. Okay, so I'm going to sign in over here. What's going on now? Looks like this thing has frozen. That is excellent. Yeah. Correct. Oh, this is epic. Oh, there we go. It's now responded. Okay, so let's sign in here. So we're going to sign into tenant admin. So this is, instead of using Django's admins, in the normal case, it would be /admin. Now we're using tenant admin to sign in over here. And likewise on tenant 2, we're going to sign in here. Tenant admin, right. Okay, so let's sign in to tenant 1. Let's just paste tenant 1 example. And we're going to sign in with tenant 2's example. Right. It's tenant 1, tenant 2. Root is the password. Fantastic password. Use it, don't use it. Okay, we sign in there. Okay, so what we're looking at over here is Django's admin. It's stylized, and I'm going to explain how I did that. And we've got customers. We've got a ghost model, which I will explain later. And we've also got users and an instance. Okay, so let's have a look at customers first. And this is just to prove the point that we've got isolation on our data. So we've got tenant data here for tenant 1, and you can see the data is different to tenant 2. Likewise, we've got users for this particular tenant 1 being just one user, tenant 1. And on this side here, we've got 2 users here. So we've got tenant 2 and we've got test 2. Okay, so what this allows you to do is every tenant has the ability to add as many users as they want. For this example, I've also deactivated Django's permission system, right? But you can easily enable that, and you can then create custom roles and responsibilities for every user that you add to the system. So it's quite extensible in that regard. Okay, and then lastly, we've also got an instance overview over here. So you can see here we've got tenant 1, tenant 2, and if I click on edit, then it just gives us a view of what the tenant information looks like. The only thing that you are able to do here is just upload an image for this particular tenant. Again, everything you see is just running in Django's admin. And more on the ghost model a little bit later. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is jump back to the slides and explain the core functionality of how I achieved this. The first thing we're going to look at is, okay, the user interface. The first thing is Jazzmin. So Jazzmin is literally a drop-in skin for Django's admin. It allows you to customize Django's admin in a way that you just saw. It's highly extensible. It uses select2 drop-down. So if you know select2.js, if you've used that in any of your applications, it is a fantastic application or like plugin for building front-end user interfaces. You can also customize it in any way that you want. So yeah, very extensible. And again, flexibility on styling. But you can go Google search Jazzmin and research more how this all works. Okay, jumping into the tenant model itself. Okay, just to explain what's going on here. So we've got a tenant model, which is effectively just a normal class model where we specify our tenant information. So we've got tenant name, address, telephone number, email, subdomain, etc. So we've got an app here called System Management, and we've just got models.py with tenant inside there. In fact, I might just jump over to VS Code to show you this because the text is really small on the slides. So we can see here under models, and I just wanted to zoom in here so you can actually see what's going on. Okay, let's see. I hope that's a little bit better. So yeah, we've got a tenant model over here, and then down at the bottom, we've got what we call a tenant-aware model. So this tenant-aware model is what you're going to sort of inherit in every single Django app that you build going forward, which I'll give an example of a little bit later. The only thing that this thing does is it literally just has a foreign key relation to the tenant model that we created at the top. That's it. It's as simple as that. Okay. Then we've got a custom user model. I like using abstract-based user models purely because I like to have full control over the entire custom user model, right? Django's also got an abstract user, which is basically just using Django's core user model, which you can extend slightly, but you don't have full control over it. So in this case, I've just specified my user model. Everything here is pretty much Django related. The one thing, yeah, so that's basically that. Okay, going back to the slides, so I don't lose my place. Then the next thing I wanted to talk about is the middleware. So I've written a custom middleware. What this middleware does is it actually looks at the URL HTTP request, and then it pulls the subdomain information from that request, and then it will look in the database if that tenant exists or not. That's all that it does. And then likewise with this middleware, we just need to specify the middleware in our settings.py file in the middleware section. So that's done. By the way, when you fork this and clone this project from GitHub, you don't need to worry about all of this. I'm just explaining how, like, what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, next thing we need to think about is authentication. So let me jump back to the actual VS Code side. So if you look at authentication, the only thing that this class is doing is literally just authenticating a user based on the email and password that was specified for that user in the context of the tenant that it's trying to sign into, right? Meaning if you try to sign into a tenant and that user doesn't exist, or you've got tenant 1 and you're using tenant 2's credentials to sign into tenant 1, it won't let you in because the user name and password has to be in the context of the tenant that it's trying to sign into. If we go forward, to the next slide over here. Now, there's a little bit of I call it a hack. When building Django apps, you have to specify, and you creating models in Django, you have to specify and register that model in admin.py so you can actually see the model in the admin user interface, right? The way that you would do that is admin.register and the model name. So what this class is doing here, it's creating a custom version of that is tenant aware, meaning that every single model that you register going forward, it has to be in the context of the tenant that you are registering the model for. Meaning, when you sign in, Django knows that this model is a tenant-aware model or not. Okay, so take note of that. Let's go down here. So that's the Django admin site. And then lastly, we've got views. So the views basically means this ties into the authentication side of the Django app. And effectively, if you try to sign in with incorrect credentials, it will then throw a response back saying invalid credentials for this tenant. So this just handles that login view. And then lastly, over here, when you register a model going forward in any other application within Django, these three methods have to be present at all times: get query set, save model, get form. And this basically tells Django that when you saving models, you updating models, etc., that it's tenant aware, that it's going to save the right information for that tenant, and when you're viewing that information, that all the information is filtered correctly. And you can see down here that we've got tenant admin site.register, and we're registering the customer and the customer admin respectively. Okay, so let me show you what this actually looks like in reality. So if we now jump back to our application over here, by the way, everything that I've just shown you is in system management here. But going forward, if you now want to use this in your own project, the two main things you need to take note of is the patterns behind customers and ghost. Okay, so now let's look at customers. If you want to build a simple CRUD application, this works quite brilliantly because you don't have to create any views for CRUD. You don't have to create AJAX calls. You don't have to validate anything. You can just use Django's built-in validations with creating these models, and you can use model forms, etc. And yeah, it just simplifies life a lot more. So if we wanted to add a new customer, for example, so we can say test, give it an example, test@test.com, and then let's just save this. Okay, and by the way, now if I've added a new customer, it won't be available on tenant 2, by the way, because I added it to tenant 1. So how this looks practically behind the scenes is as follows. So if we have a look here at this here is a standard application within Django's context. The only thing here that I've added into is the models. Let me go back to this side, sorry. Is the model. So you can see here that I've inherited the tenant aware model, and I just, instead of using models.model up here for the class, you're just telling it to use a tenant aware model. You then specify first name, last name, email, phone number, etc., and everything else is standard. It's a standard Django model. The only thing we're doing is creating a tenant aware model. Done. The next thing you need to do is register the model in admin. Okay, everything you're about to see here is standard Django directives. There's nothing fancy going on here. The only thing I have done is imported the tenant admin site to register the model in the admin side. Okay, so we get our custom user model that we defined earlier. We create a model form. So I always put this in here. I know it's not best practice to use fields all. It's better to like list out your fields. But for the context of this, it's all is fine. In the real world, you would list them out. So we're going to use our decorator admin.register customer, and we're going to then specify our customer admin. So this here is again all standard Django code, meaning we can now specify what fields we want to see on the Django admin and in what order. Okay, so we want to list per display 25, list display. These field names are exactly the field names that we see in our model here. First name, last name, email, etc. is exactly what we see here. First name, last name, email, etc. Okay, you can also create field sets. So what's cool about field sets is that it creates these segmentations within Jazzmin. So you can see here I've just created field sets, and then it creates these nice blocks like customer information, date information, and that's specified through these field sets that you see here: customer information, date information, etc. Moreover, you can also specify read-only fields. So these are fields that are not editable by Django's admin at all. Okay, once this is done, as I said earlier, you need these three methods to make sure that the saving is done correctly for each tenant, that filtering is done correctly, and when you get the response back, that everything is filtered out correctly. And then lastly, so this here, you just have to copy paste into your own app. And then lastly, you will say, instead of writing admin.register, you write tenant admin site.register customer admin. Perfect. So now we've built up a full CRUD application without using any views. You can see here my views are empty. I've only just created a model, and I've registered that model in admin.py. Done. Okay. So now you're going to ask the question, but Shaun, I want to do more than just CRUD applications. I want to build custom dashboards. I want to do some Ajax calls. I want to incorporate HTMX and Alpine.js and all these cool things. How do you do that? Well, I've got you covered, right? And this is where the ghost model concept comes in. All right, so let me show you what the ghost model does, first of all. I call it a ghost model because, as you know, the only way to get sort of anything showing in the Django admin is through a model, and it has to be registered in the Django admin. Okay, so the ghost model is a model that exists but doesn't exist. It's a ghost. So what you're looking at over here is a custom view and template with custom data that's coming through the context. And we can also use Ajax. We can call APIs, and we can render these responses back as we want to for each tenant, right? So how did I achieve this? Let's jump back into the code. Okay, so this is now the ghost model app, right? So you would follow the exact same pattern in your own project going forward, and it's highly customizable, but this here is the template that you would use. Starting from the model side, you just specify a ghost model with no fields, okay? Again, you need to make it a tenant-aware model. And the only thing you need to pay attention to is the meta class here, where our verbose name plural is ghost example. This here will specify the name of the link that you see in this nav bar here on the left hand side. So you see ghost example is same as ghost example that you see over there. Okay, that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do is register this ghost model in Django's admin so you can actually see the model. Okay, so how did we do this? Again, we just create a class called ghost model admin. Okay, we specify the model. Now the one thing we need to do is we just need to create a URL to the model to itself in some senses, so that it knows that it needs to kind of redirect to itself. And that's all we're doing here. We're just creating a path to that ghost model, and we're going to specify it as a view, and that's done. And then again, we're going to register this ghost model and ghost admin in Django tenant, in the tenant admin site, and that's that. It's as simple as that. So if you were going to build your own ghost or your own custom views and templates within Django's admin itself, this is exactly what you would do. The next thing you want to do now is let's go through the views. So there's quite a bit going on here, but it's actually quite straightforward. The first thing we want to do is we want to actually render the actual HTML page that we're seeing within Django's admin itself. That's the first thing we want to do. So in order to do that, you can see here we've got a ghost view. And I've just created a login required mixin and list view. This is all standard Django directives again. Also just put no caching in for some reason. I can't remember why, but it's there. So here you can see we specify our template name, so ghost overview.html. If we look in our templates directory here, we've got our ghost overview.html. So just as you would set it up in any Django application. And over here we specify our model, our ghost model. And then, as you know, with building up these views, traditionally you would just create like a function-based view or class-based view, and then you can pass in context data into that. Now, it works slightly differently with this context of using Django's admin to do that, with regards to sending custom data through the context. But you can essentially just use this piece of code here, which gets the context data and then it updates the context data. So you can see here that we've specified the tenant admin site, and this is the admin site context. And we load in the model metadata, and then lastly we can pass in custom context data, which is cool. So with this logic now you can actually now do things like read entries from a database. You can do whatever you really want to do and pass it as a normal Django context into the HTML side. So you see here we've got custom data is the name of this particular Ginger tag, well it will become, and then this is the custom data, custom context data. So if we would go back to the HTML page, you can see here that we've got our block breadcrumbs, we've got block contents, just as we all know, and then over here is our custom data Ginger tag. Done. Okay, so that's cool, but now you want to take it a step further. You want to do some AJAX calls, you want to work with APIs, you want to serve machine learning models, etc. You want to build analytics dashboards that only work with JSON objects, etc. So we can then take this a step further, and I've created a very simple API over here. So again, just a class. This is an example of a post request, so you can do some cool stuff inside here. But what's important is the tenant. So I've got a utility function which just gets the tenant by the request, and then for everything that we do, we just need to pass that tenant context into all of our filtering when we're calling up our Django models, etc. So for example, here's a get request, tenant equals get tenant. If request.method equals get, then customer equals, we're just going to put our customer object into a list, and we're going to say filter is tenant equals tenant, and that's it. But if you remember, if we go back to our customer models, we never specified a tenant foreign key here at all. The reason why that works is through this tenant aware model that we inherited earlier when we created this customer. So if we go back here, we just need to filter all our objects by the tenant, and then we can pass that into our data object, and then just create a JSON object of that, and then then you can use it as you would any other API. So if we look here at our JavaScript side of things, this is a simple AJAX call. We're just doing a get request through this URL, and this URL is again managed through our application URL patterns over here. There's our API endpoints, pretty straightforward. And then we're going to fetch the data, and we're just going to render the data to the DOM. And you can see here we've got this DOM over here, which is our customer data contents, and that then gets passed into our customer data content over there. And again, if I now go back to this side here, and I click on my ghost model, you can then fetch that data. So yeah, that's effectively what the ghost model is. So just to quickly recap, we've covered how you can build really, let's call it simple CRUD applications really quickly without doing a whole lot of work. Secondly, we've also explored a way to add custom views and logic and templates into Django's admin directly without building user interfaces and worrying about all the other stuff that could take up our time. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so we've covered more demos, but now you might be asking yourself, like, why is this important and what are our specific use cases for something like this? Why do we need this? So here they are. Number one, a quick proof of concept. If you want to test out a software as a service idea, you want to try something out, but you really don't want to bother with the details of building a multi-tenanted application, there you go. What I've found in my work personally is with the clients that I've dealt with, a lot of organizations already have some sort of baseline infrastructure set up, like SQL servers. They're behind VNets, they've got VMs, whatever the case may be. So building internal apps for your organization or a customer's organization is now really quick. You can deploy the app really quick. You can do a whole lot of stuff. And what's nice is you can also incorporate that. Let's say a customer is using Azure. You can incorporate like Microsoft's authentication library in as part of your authentication flow, without worrying about things like sending out emails and OTPs and all this kind of stuff. But what's really cool is that this serves as like a baseline cookie cutter project for anyone to build up a really cool multi-tenanted application, software as a service. You can extend this to include payment gateways like PayPal, Paystack, Payfast, whatever you want, really. And it's database agnostic. Again, I know that there's other third-party applications out there that do this for you, like I think it's called Django Multi-Tenants, but it only works with a PostgreSQL database, and that particular package separates every tenant by a schema, and then with that adds a bit of complexity around signaling and routing and things like this. The problem is that if you, especially working with a organization, to try to get that organization to spin up a PostgreSQL database could be a nightmare. So you just work with what they've got, and you can use whatever database for this particular method. Yeah, and that pretty much wraps up my talk for now, and I welcome any questions that anyone in the audience might have. And then lastly, there is a GitHub link over here. So everyone please take out your phone, snap scan that. It will take you to the Django multi-tenant site, and my LinkedIn is all there. You guys can fork it, clone it. There's contributing guidelines there if you want to. Use it in your projects. Go wild with it. Yeah, if there's any suggestions, please let me know. I'm open to any suggestions, topics, ideas, thoughts. Yeah. Okay, now I can welcome any questions. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so basically the question was, if we deploy this to a customer's site, then the multi-tenancy part of it will only be applicable to that particular organization. Right. Okay, so to answer that, it depends on the context of the customer and what they're doing. What's really cool about this is in that particular instance, I would suggest just using a subdomain called app.customername.com, for example, and then you can just treat it as a single type of application, like not multi-tenancy in the traditional sense, but you would follow the same directives as a followed and same patterns, but then just work with it as a single, thing. Yeah, I guess that's the answer. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, I mean, to that point, right, the same way that you use Django's. Okay, so first of all, the question was, if you have different departments in your organization, you can still use it as a multi-tenanted application in that sense. So let's say, for example, you've got marketing dot company name and you've got engineering dot company name. What you could do is you could create ghost models. So you could have a ghost model for engineering, a ghost model for marketing. You can then use Django's permissions system that's already built in the box. And then you can say, okay, these users that are from marketing can only see the marketing, link, so on and so forth. And then the engineering guys can only see the engineering side. And then there's no cross-contamination. So now you've got multi-tenancy, and then multi-tenancy across the subdomain plus on the views and models side as well. Yeah. So you can separate them like that. So.
So with that in mind, with your ghost model part of things, I didn't quite see the implementation, but what is your number of database tables? Does your ghost model create a database table per tenant so that you would like basically double up, or is it a proxy model?
Yeah, it's more like a proxy model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Even though it's not explicitly like defined there as a proxy model, but it kind of works like that because you haven't specified any fields, in that model. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. A good series of questions.
Hey man, thanks for the talk.
You're welcome.
I wanted to know from your experience if you've ever had to build a multi-tenant app where you had to roll out database migrations where each tenant has their own database instance, or if it's on a each tenant has their own schema with tables inside of that. How would you do that? And if you have 7 databases, and applying the migration on the 7th one on the 5th one fails, how do you roll it back? How do you make it atomic and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's also one of the reasons why I like this particular approach, is because of challenges like you've mentioned there. So to answer your question specifically, I haven't dealt with those particular problems because I've been fortunate that most of the work I've done is with organizations, so I'm able to just use the ID separation approach. But yeah, but I know that, let's say, I think it's Django tenant, the package that works with the schema does handle the migrations across. But exactly that, I mean, the schema could fail on one of the tenants, and then you're going to have an issue where your schemas are not synchronized. How would I? And in terms of having a database separation per tenant, to your question, how would I roll that back? I think that's going to be a manual effort, to be honest. You're going to have to go in there and find out why the server was down, or like why there was a permission error, or whatever the case is. Yeah, I don't think there's an automated or easy way to solve that problem, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? I don't see anything on the Discord. Anyone else have any questions for Shaun? Otherwise, thank you very much, Shaun. That was fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.